goal of human endeavor is to remedy the congenital condition of ignorance and the attendant suffering, and in the process raise the person to higher levels of awareness and achievement. Psychology in the Indian tradition attempts not only to understand the nature of the person, the causes and consequences of her conduct, but also to explore the methods and means of transforming the person in pursuit of perfection in her being, certainty in knowing, and happiness in feeling. Deconstructing the ego and deconditioning the person are the key to the transformation of the person. For it is the ego that obscures the true nature of the self, and the state of conditioning is what curtails the freedom of the person. One could take a series of behavioral and attitudinal steps that would help in the process of personal transformation. They include: A. Develop discriminating insights into what is transient and what is enduring, with the intent of going after the enduring rather than chasing the impermanent and the illusion. Or aspect of the reality of change as natural, or accept the reality of change as natural and inevitable, and cease longing for mythical permanence. B. Cultivate detachment and practice dispassionateness. C. Endeavor to be virtuous and ethical in behavior. And D. Develop a sense of commitment to transcend the ego compulsions. This comes through bhakti, having a guru or a teacher to whom you surrender your ego. Controlling the mind, deconstructing the ego, and deconditioning the person lead to cognitive excellence and access to consciousness as such. Cognitive understanding of the nature of the self or of the world is insufficient to have experience of pure consciousness, because cognition itself is a consequence of the existential predicament implied in the organization of the mind itself. The ultimate quest, therefore, is self-realization. Self-realization is possible in the fourth state called Turiya, in which consciousness such is accessed. The ego is transcended, and the self or consciousness in its true state is experienced or realized. The experience of the true self, as distinct from the misconstrued ego, has transformational consequences of the person. Self-realized persons are saintly in their behavior. I think what distinguishes a saint from a scholar knows, but the saint becomes what he knows. In other words, there is no dichotomy between knowing and being, belief and behavior, cognition and content. So it is said in the Upanishads, to know Brahman is to become Brahman. In other words, if you know that drinking is bad, you don't drink. If you know smoking is bad, you don't smoke. But here, in human condition, it's possible to know that something is bad and still do it because of other reasons. But for fourth state, if you get into the fourth state, whatever you know, you automatically incorporate with your being. A quiescent state of mind obtained by practice of meditation conducive to the deconstruction of the ego, it also facilitates the experience of the fourth state of the mind. The mind in the raw is restless and ever wandering with constantly fluctuating states. The fluctuating states called vrittis can be brought under control by focused attention, ekagra. There are a variety of physical and psychological factors that distract the person from focusing attention to control the naturally fluctuating states of the mind. The physical factors include sickness and fatigue. The psychological hurdles are undesirable attitudes and beliefs, as well as attentional defects. Harmful attitudes and beliefs include carelessness, apathy, and worldly interests and delusions. Psychological hurdles are related to inability to concentrate and maintain a stable state of concentration. So Indian psychology studies all this because you have to work on it. The physical and psychological hurdles for maintaining focused attention can be overcome by physical practices such as regulating breathing, cultivating habits of friendliness and compassion, and being indifferent to pleasure and pain by practicing dispassionateness and engaging in certain cognitive exercises. There are a variety of techniques under the name of yoga to control the fluctuating states of the mind. Meditation is the one that is recommended most. Meditation involves three types of mental exercises: concentration, dharana; contemplation, dhyana; and samadhi. Concentration is focused attention on an object, image, or thought, which enables the person to control the habitual wanderings of the mind. Contemplation, dhyana, involves uninterrupted attention to the object of contemplation for a prolonged period of time. Practice of dhyana leads to samadhi, a state of complete absorption in the object of contemplation, accompanied by loss of self-awareness, where the destruction of the ego begins to take place. Loss of self-awareness is the beginning of ego deconstruction. With the deconstruction of the ego begins the breaking down of the deterministic circle enveloping the person and moving the person on the path of liberation and transcendence. Deconstruction of the ego involves freeing of the person's thoughts, feelings, and actions from all kinds of attachment. Deconstruction of the ego is possible with insight gained by making wise discrimination between the true self and the ego. It is also possible through celestial devotion, bhakti, where love for the Supreme helps to promote altruism and to overcome mundane desires of attachment. The deconstruction of the ego may be achieved by actions free from selfishness. Now, what are the implications of this kind of thought? Indian psychology, as I said, is holistic, positive, applied, and secular. It is also sacred. It is holistic in that it deals with the person in all the dimensions as the unique and the unified subject. Study of the person may not be effective following any direct exercise. It may be pursued more fruitfully within a holistic perspective. The triology of the mind, cognition, cognition, and effect, lost in the reductive analysis of the mind in contemporary psychological discourse, find their rightful place in Indian psychology. Indian psychology provides a basis for understanding individuality and personal identity in a holistic way, so that individual identities do not conflict with global universal identity, which is considered the most salient and the others subordinate. Indian psychology is positive despite the fact that the human situation is seen as one of persistent imperfection and pervasive suffering. The goal of human striving is bliss and enduring happiness. The goal is eminently assured. According to Indian psychology, there are effective means of achieving happiness and avoiding pain and suffering. The goal of Indian psychology is to alleviate human suffering and provide an enduring remedy for the existential elements of the persons tormented by insatiable desires and traumatized by unending anxiety. In a significant sense, Indian psychology is an applied science. Psychology is seen as essentially a subdiscipline to improve human condition by reducing pain and promoting happiness in us. It investigates human nature with the explicit objective of transforming and not of controlling the person, transforming the person for better. Indian psychology has secular and sacred perspectives. This helps to break down science-religion dichotomy and promote a dialogue between the two, which is currently missing. It also brings ethical considerations into the precincts of science. With its concerns for the sacred, Indian psychology provides profound insights into psychology of religion. It gives direction and purpose to life and helps to promote altruism and common good. The sacred application of meditation is one of achieving self-realization and attaining the state of existential transcendence and the ultimate freedom called kaivalya. A state of kaivalya is one in which the person becomes completely free from all kinds of karma. Breaking the cycle of birth and death, the person realizes the purushahood within and reaches the state of perfection. In the secular domain, Indian psychology has ramifications for psychological theory as well as application. Indian psychology recognizes that physical processes influence mental functions just as mental factors affect bodily states. For this reason, preliminary preparations for yoga involve physical postures, breathing exercises. However, Indian psychology emphasizes the integral connection of body, mind, and consciousness. Consciousness is not a quality or attribute of the physical system. Therefore, it may not be properly understood by simple analysis of neurological correlates. However, neurophysiological studies are not irrelevant to psychology because the mind is connected to the brain. Indian psychology has implications for cognitive science. It provides a conceptual framework for a comprehensive science of consciousness. Psychic development technologies such as yoga and meditation constitute an important segment of Indian psychology because it is believed that cognitive excellence and personal transformation can be achieved by practice. Meditation and the variety of yoga practices are seen as important tools helping the person on the path toward freedom from ego compulsions, liberation from the mental constraint, and transcendence in the existential predicament in stages and for unfolding the expanding human potentials. Along the secular path, meditation has a number of beneficial consequences to the practicing person. Meditation helps psychosomatic well-being by reducing anxiety and stress. Practice of meditation helps to unfold hidden human potentials and acquire extraordinary human abilities. Paranormal phenomena are not supernatural, but a natural extension of human potentials. While humans depend largely on sensory neural system to process information, there is another source of learning beyond the sense-mediated knowing that is facilitated by focused attention and meditation. Similarly, though our actions are generally mediated by the motor system, it is possible for the mind to act directly on other minds and physical systems. These hidden potentials open up possibilities for a variety of non-conventional beneficial outcomes for health and healing, and new modalities of information exchange and the interaction between humans and their environment. Empirical studies suggest that practice of meditation increases the person's life expectancy, promotes mental health, and improves quality of life. There are multiple meditative techniques, but their defining characteristic is gaining control over the mind by manipulating attention. There are various kinds of yoga, but the defining characteristic of yoga is, according to me, the deconstruction of the ego. In karma yoga, the deconstruction takes place by service and altruistic, selfless work. In bhakti yoga, celestial love in the form of worship deconstructs the ego. In jnana yoga, the darkness of the ego disappears with the dawn of wisdom. Freedom from suffering is proportional to one's control over and ability to transcend the ego. Happiness is thus inversely related to ego involvement. Deconstructed or dismantled ego achieved by meditative practice and detachment is not the same as dysfunctional ego. Deconditioning the person is not the same as depersonalization. The psychological health of the individual depends not on the strength of the ego, but on the freedom from ego compulsions and deconditioning of the ego-dependent behavior. Indian psychology gives rise to unique personality typology, which has important diagnostic and therapeutic implications. Persons with preponderance of sattva element and so on. The rich phenomenology of consciousness provided by Indian psychology is useful for psychodiagnostic purposes. The centrality of consciousness advocated in Indian psychology is pregnant with possibilities for developing a variety of helpful psychotherapeutic practices. The epistemological dualism implied in Indian psychology has profound pedagogical implications. It provides for not only transactional learning, but also for transcendental experiences. Mind is the source of transactional reality. It is the instrument of object creation. Mind training by focused attention leads to cognitive excellence. Mind is also the resource to elevate the person to the transcendental realm and thus enable one to reach sublime states of subjectivity and self-realization. The recognition of nididhyasana as the elimination of as the culmination of the learning process would have much to offer for filling the value vacuum in education today. Indian psychology has important implications for understanding organizational behavior and for optimizing cooperation and collective achievement. It goes beyond the conventional categories such as collectivism and individualism. For example, the concept of karma yoga, action without attachment, is seminal and uniquely relevant in the world sick and tired of competition and exploitation to help usher in a new organizational culture that aims at altruism and common good rather than personal or corporate success in monetary terms. Mahatma Gandhi's socio-political experiments in 20th century show the relevance of Indian psychology to applied social psychology. The lives of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Ramana Maharshi, among others, exemplify the powerful impact of Indian psychological thought on personal transformation. Indian psychology places a premium on moral development. Morality is not considered arbitrary or external to human science. Rather, morals are intrinsic to human conduct. Indian psychology does not divorce values from facts. The principles stated so far are obviously derived from yoga and Advaita. However, they appear to constitute the common core of Indian psychology. The centrality of consciousness is accepted by all the major systems of Indian thought, including Buddhism and Jainism. I will not go further into it. The best illustration you can see from the stanza from Musulamdar, the Buddhistic text. Various indeed are the usages of the terms Atman and Dharma. They all refer to the transformation of consciousness. Now this is the broad outline of Indian psychology. And tomorrow in my lecture, I will try to develop a model to do psychology research, to plan out what is it about human nature, how can we study it. And in other words, what I'm trying to say is that these principles can be developed into hypotheses. And hypotheses can be studied and tested in the laboratories. And these could give us information which is lost today to psychology because psychology became too focused on one aspect of our being, our biological being, and it has forgotten the other side of our being. And hopefully, Indian psychology can bring back the focus to the wholeness of human nature. Two sides, the spiritual, if you like the word, and the physical, or physical and other, which is ignored today in psychology. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity.
I was wondering what it is about the nature of consciousness as such, in which experience of it is so transformational. I was wondering about what it is in the nature of consciousness as such, in which experience of it is so transformational.
What is the nature of consciousness as such?
What is it about the nature of consciousness as such?
That is the basic difference. The basic difference is in the Western conception of consciousness. Intentionality is considered its defining characteristic. What is it about? But here, from the Indian perspective, consciousness is essentially non-intentional. And therefore, it is a self-luminous, just like light that is visible and at the same time it is not visible. So the basic difference in the concept of consciousness in the East and the West, or at least the Indian and the West, is that consciousness is not intentional. Pure consciousness is non-intentional state of consciousness. It's awareness as such, without any contact.
And what is it about experience then of consciousness as such?
The experience of consciousness is consciousness processed by the mind. In human experience arises when the mind reflects consciousness. In reflecting consciousness, the mind embellishes it because it has its own preconceptions. For example, my senses are particularly developed in a particular way, therefore this looks to me in a particular way. The way bats perceive is very different from the way we perceive. The same reality but their instruments of perception are somewhat different from our instruments of perception. And therefore, what we are seeing is what we are constructing. And the Indian perspective is that it is possible to totally transcend the sensory component and come face to face with reality. Because consciousness is the essence. Essence of everything is consciousness. There is a consciousness in this object, which means sattva element of it, which is the essence of it. If we know it, you know it. And that knowing, it transforms your being so that there is no gap between that and you.
Are you implying, twofold question. Are you implying that there's one unitary consciousness, or are there degrees of that? And my second question is, if you attain this one full unitary consciousness of reality, is the transformation therefore permanent? Or can you retrogress?
In the Indian tradition, it's a metaphysical question. Now, from the Advaita point of view, there is only one Brahman, consciousness, which is individuated by the mind perceiving it. In the yoga tradition, there are different centers of consciousness. There are multiple Purushas. So, to me, is essentially a metaphysical difference. Whether you are more comfortable with this, seeing one in many, or many in one. And so, from the psychological perspective, it makes no difference.
And is it permanent once you achieve that consciousness, whichever one you prefer? Is it permanent?
Since it is identical, even when you are going from Sankhya Yoga, Advaita, which is considered having many centers of consciousness, and not Advaita, Sankhya Yoga, Advaita, which has only one, Brahman. The point is that none of them have any individually identifying characteristics. And therefore, A, which is exactly like B, which is exactly like C, whether you call them all one or different makes no sense, except Sankhya Yoga people think it is necessary to assume multiple centers because of personal responsibility, and all that becomes much more understandable, sensible from the multiple.
Let me rephrase it. Once you're enlightened, are you permanently enlightened?
Yes. And also, according to many of these traditions, you can be enlightened in this life while keeping your body. You don't have to totally be devoid of body. Your body is the one which limits you. So, according to Shankara, as well as in yoga, it is possible to become enlightened, called Jivan Mukta, while you're alive.
There's a question over here.
What would you recommend for further reading?
Reading of Indian psychology?
Yes.
Handbook. Handbook. I don't know if it's available here or not. See, there are many books. For example, the classic book is actually entitled Indian Psychology by Jadunath Sinha, 3 volumes, written many years ago. But the thing is, unless you are very well versed in Indian philosophy, it's very difficult for you to understand. See, and that's the main problem. Otherwise, it really takes you to the classical sources. It's a very good text. 3 volumes, Indian Psychology by Jadunath Sinha, S-I-N-H-A.
There's a question over here.
Yes, sir.
I'm very heartened to see much of what you have said is what we're trying to put in this university and into a kind of school model and a learning process. First, I would want to make a request. Can I have access to that lecture that you have given?
Yeah, this I can give you.
Okay, that's number one.
No, you can print it.
And number two is that I'm very happy with the discuss. I
inserted question. It seems like one of the things that the Western psychologists or scientists will ask, maybe not the scientist actually, but maybe the philosopher will ask, where does this come from? That is, why are there three aspects of personality, of sattva, raja, and tamas? Why are three? Why not four? Why not five?
Well, it's very, very difficult to say, I suppose. But in the imagination of the people, rishis, whoever it is, who have come up with this idea, these three are sufficient to explain. So you don't want to have too many. The question is how few you need to have to explain the multiplicity of variety that you see. And they thought with these three you can explain. That's all there is. If they felt the need for the fourth one, I'm sure they would have thought of it. Three is what they came up with. Can you think of the fourth? That will go. That is necessary to make this more wholesome.
Well, what I think of is Gurdjieff, for example, has 8 types, which are very common these days is the Enneagram, which is the theoretical structure developed by basically Gurdjieff and other psychologists who developed it into psychology.
But this three here, what we have to keep in perspective is not only limited to classifying human beings, but they are the basic elements out of which matter has evolved. And what we are saying is that can also be used to have kind of a personality topology of people. They have, and then you can have the gradations of these in different ways and have any number of personality types. But the thing is, this is basic to nature, to the process of evolution. Matter consists of these three basic characteristics. They're not elements, they're three basic characteristics. And so we are saying that you can use it to have a personal typology because a person in whom there is greater sattvic element is the one who is more likely to be intellectual, oriented, and with more tamas is work oriented, without enlightenment, without knowing why he's doing what he's doing. So this is unfortunately it has not been worked out as much as it should. There was some work done, I've seen about a dozen papers on this, but more can be done to develop and systematically build a questionnaire to study personality on the basis of this. 2-3 questionnaires were done, but they were not, in my mind, they are not satisfied. More work needs to be done. I think there's potential.
Yes, and also to match it up against the big four factor theories and the various multi-factor personality theories that have been developed on Western in Western contexts.
But 3 seems to have some fascination in India. You have seen 3 murtis: Vishnu, Brahma, and Maheshwara. So you will find 3 in many things. So in fact, that's why I call my model Trishul. 3 in 1. Mind, body, consciousness model. 3 in 1. Trishul. So you have many. In fact, the Trivamsika, I refer to the stanza. That man puts everything in 3s. 3 is sacred for him. Everything in 3 categories. Everything 3 categories. So but then again, this is a man's fascination, his ego.
Because there is a 3-dimensional picture. Whatever we see can be defined with 3 dimensions, normally, physically. So maybe that has some meaning. I was wondering if you have the concept of time, what happens to when you input time. Many times we consider it a 4th dimension, to consciousness, or to this 3 sattva, rajas, and tamas. Do they vary with time?
Well, consciousness as such is supposed to be non-local. So it should transcend time and space in some ways. But certainly it is a function of the mind. The time comes from the mind. And therefore, the physical, mind is physical, tamas and sattvic, so it has to have some basis.
So it will influence.
It will have to have some basis. That's where the problem is. That's where the problem. The time is the one which creates the problem.
Thank you.
Right.
You're not saying that time is an illusion, are you?
No.
Well, then how does it play into transcendental consciousness? Is time a factor in it? Is consciousness experienced inside of time or outside of time? They're studying Heidegger, being and time. In Heidegger's view of consciousness, you can't exclude time. It's part of the fallenness of being finite creatures that are not infinite, divine, transcendent, and everlasting, which this approach would, embrace. So, how do you resolve that dilemma of putting time in a proper perspective because time's winged chariot is drawing near?
I don't see any problem at all with it because there are various levels of reality. And in some level, time is transcendent. In other words, the effect of time will not constrain what you do and what you have. Whereas some other levels is as constrained. So whenever your mind is in place, the time constrains. But when you totally transcend the functioning of the mind and you are in the level of consciousness as such, then you transcend at that level. Time has no effect on it.
I'm assuming that in these philosophies that there's a mind-body separation. Because it doesn't seem like you connect mind with physicality. So my question is there a version of the mind-body problem in Indian philosophy? Is there like a strong concern for how they're connected?
Yeah, there is, but then there is a basic difference. The difference is that the mind is different from consciousness. Okay? And whereas in the Western tradition they are more or less equated. And the second point is that the mind is physical in the Indian tradition. In the Western tradition, if the mind is physical, it's a reductive kind of a brain. But it's not so. It is physical and different from the brain. So there's a very crucial difference. And unless you keep in perspective the difference, you can't understand the nuances of the Indian viewpoint. But the question is how these two are so different, consciousness and body are connected. Mind and body in the Western tradition is difficult. With the radical dualism has the problem of how to interface. Whereas here you have a mind in between, which is able to connect the two. This is what makes a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you.
Thank